So today we're going to talk a little bit about sentence types, and this can be confusing, and that's okay. We're going to come and revisit this, so don't feel like you have to get it all in this one short video, and we will be talking about it in many different ways. But there are different sentence types in writing, and those different sentence types are simple, compound, complex, and complex compound right at the top here. So I would have this out and have a way to kind of mark it up. I'm going to be highlighting and marking mine as we talk through it. So a simple sentence contains a subject and a verb. And typically that verb is that to be verb, which we've discussed before, right? Is, are, was, were, had been, all of those type of things. So those are the most common. But also it can be an action. The thing about a simple sentence is it expresses a single complete thought that can stand on its own. So for example, the baby cried for food. We have our baby, which is our subject. What is our subject doing? Well, the baby cried. Then we have Professor Maple's intelligent students completed and turned in their homework. So this is a longer sentence. It doesn't have to be short. You can have all these things. We have our subject, which are the students. What did they do? They completed and they turned in their home. This is called a compound verb where the subject is doing both of these things. Then we have Megan and Ron ate too much and felt sick. So we have our subjects, Megan and Ron, which is our compound subject. What did they do? They ate too much and felt sick, right? Our verbs here. So we want to think about our simple sentences because it's the most common sentence that we use. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's great. But we also want to think about other sentence types. So the next sentence type we're going to talk about is the compound sentence. And the compound sentence has two independent clauses. An independent clause is part of a sentence that can stand alone because it contains a subject and a verb. So really the independent clause, it contains two complete sentences. So basically a compound sentence, right here, contains two complete sentences, as we just said. Now, you might have seen these words before. These independent clauses are joined by conjunctions. And if you're really old like me, you might remember the old like Schoolhouse Rock song, like conjunction, junction, what's your function? But this is also known as fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet. So when you have these words that connect your two sentences, you also have a comma, and it creates a compound sentence. So the shoplifter had stolen the clothes, comma, so he ran, right, subject, verb, towards the police. Right, both sides of the conjunction are complete, on either side are complete. The shoplifter had stolen clothes and he ran over and saw the police. Therefore, it's a compound sentence. Then we have, they spoke to him in Spanish. They, right, spoke to him in Spanish, but he responded in English. Right, he responded in English. This would be me. My Spanish is always poor. I can understand a lot more than I can actually speak. So this is a compound sentence. It uses the conjunction but to separate the two individual clauses. Now, there is a trick to this, and I want to highlight this for you. Instead of using this comma, fanboys, you can also use a semicolon. So a semicolon, I'm going to write it up here, it connects two simple sentences without using fanboys. Right, so that's what a semicolon does. So in this instance, I could cut out the comma so and use a semicolon. I could cut out the comma but and use a semicolon. That is also correct. So a semicolon is a correct way to use a compound sentence. Okay, on to sentence type 3. This is your complex sentence. So a complex sentence is an independent clause joined by one or two more dependent clauses. Now, a dependent clause may have a subject or a verb, but it's normally a phrase or it could be a fragment, but it is subordinating, which means it's underneath, right? Like a subway or a subordinate, right? It means it's less important. So remember that independent clause, that's your complete sentence. So we're going to have a complete sentence, and then we're going to add on to it with this dependent clause. It'll have a subject and a verb still. Okay, so a complex sentence always has a subordinator. Remember we talked about that sub? And there's actually a list of subordinators. You might have heard it before. It is an actual thing. You can Google it. This is not a word I'm making up. It is called a woobus. And I like to say it, a woobus. Why? I don't know. Because sometimes when you're doing things like syntax, you have to make it fun because it doesn't seem so fun sometimes. So a woobus is after, although, as, while, when, until, unless, because, before, if, since. Sorry, my since got kind of cut off there. So these are your subordinating clauses. They give you here, and another awful thing is these are not the only ones. These are just really the most common that we are going to recognize. So we're going to kind of keep this list as a mental list. The other subordinator that we use are relative pronouns, who, that, and which. So let's look and see what this looks like. So after eating lunch at the Cheesecake Factory, Tim went to the gym to exercise. So we have a verb here, eating lunch, but we don't have a subject here. So this is our dependent clause, right? So we also know that because it has after, which is one of our awubis words. So this is our dependent clause. Then we have a comma. Then we have our subject, Tim went to the gym to exercise. This is your complete sentence right here. This is just adding more information. So let's look at the next one. Opinionated women, right, are given disadvantages in society that privileged males accomplish. So we have our subject verb, but we have again a subject here, but we don't have a verb. And so we know this is your dependent clause, and it's connected by this relative pronoun that. You can also, and I think I do this on the next one. Oh, another piece of paper. Sorry about that. So you can also kind of switch things around. They didn't, so I'm going to switch back here. So instead of after eating lunch at Cheesecake Factory, comma, Tim went to the gym, you can switch this around and say Tim went to the gym to exercise after eating lunch, blah, 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 at the Cheesecake Factory. Notice this part right here. This has no comma. So when we have the subordinate clause in the beginning, there's a comma before the subject, always, always, always. But when we switch those two things, when we put the independent clause first, the comma disappears. So you rarely have a comma in front of the word because. That's something often I kind of see in student writing, and I just want you to be aware. Also know that you can start a sentence with because. I know our 4th grade teacher told us not to, but you may do so now. Okay, let's continue on with this and our complex sentences. So here we have the woman who taught art history 210 was fired after stealing school supplies. The woman is our subject. She was fired. And this relative clause here by who is kind of an interrupter. If it would be removed, it still stands alone. It's still a complete sentence. And so we can see that it is our independent clause. Okay, I know it's a lot. So we had simple, right? We had compound. We have complex, and now we have the 4th sentence type, compound complex. These are the only 4 sentence types. If you come across a sentence that isn't one of these types, it is not a complete grammatically correct sentence. So let's look and see what the compound complex sentence has to say. It is exactly what you would think it is. It has 2 independent clauses plus a dependent clause. So for example, after the 2 soccer players lost their game, right? So we have that subordinating conjunction, 2 soccer players subjects, they lost their game, comma, they joined their other teammates for lunch, comma, and fanboys, they went to the movies. So here we have a dependent clause, here we have an independent clause, here we have comma, coordinating conjunction, and here we have another independent clause. So having all of those together is a complex compound sentence. The next one, the man believed in the system, comma, and he knew that justice would prevail after the murderer was sent to jail. Right, so we have that too. So we have this after. This is our dependent clause thrown on the end, our independent clause, and our independent clause up here. Okay, I know it's a lot. I promise we will keep practicing. So I would like you to practice these down here, and then you can always check the handout that I have uploaded for you to see how it goes together. And as I said, this is something that you kind of have to wrap your brain around, and my goal is by the end of this class, you will kind of have this under control. So don't worry if that isn't right now. We will continue talking about this.